Hi, I'm Kristen, and this is the Simple Handmade Everyday podcast where I talk about living a creative, intentional life. I like to chat about quilting, sometimes knitting, what I'm reading and watching, and even a little about keeping a cozy, organized home. I've got my cup of tea in hand, so let's settle in for a chat. This is episode 24. Today I am drinking Harney & Sons English breakfast, sort of back to basics, loose leaf tea. I always complain that I'm drinking too caffeine, and today is no exception. This weekend I actually bought some decaf green tea. I don't know why I bothered, because green tea is already lower in caffeine, but I haven't been able to bear to actually open the package. I just got it from Trader Joe's tea bags, but I want my black tea. I love my caffeine-filled black tea. But Harney & Sons, great quality. I love it. This is not an ad. I just really like them. So, my goodness, I felt like the last time we talked, just 2 weeks ago, I was complaining that it was the depths of winter here in Southern California, and now it seems like full-on summer. It was into the 80s over the weekend, which felt really good. And, with the time change, the way the light changes, it just seems like full-on summer. You know what I mean? It's the first Monday after the time change, I was making dinner, and I was just, starting prep at 5:30 or something. So dinner's going to be ready at 6:30. And my son said, "Why are you making dinner so early?" I was like, "This is the normal time. It's just the light made it seem like it was the middle of the afternoon. Why are you making dinner at 4:30 in the afternoon?" So I totally got it. But I am loving it. So this weekend, my husband he mowed and edged the lawn. I wiped down all the patio furniture and put all the cushions back on. Now, we don't put them away because of snow. We put them away because it just rained, and it kind of ruins them to just get soaked all the time. And so I wiped down all the patio furniture, put the cushions on, rearranged my succulents, put the cushion back in my swing chair. Last year for Mother's Day, I got this chair that I love. It's like a big hanging one globe with one side opened, and you just sit in it and you can swing. Oh my God, I just love it. I can spend hours. As a matter of fact, I started to have neck problems last year because I spent so many hours in that chair. But the actual yard is a mess. There's weeds everywhere. The vegetable garden is just 100% either nasturtiums, which just self-seed. I'm not lying to you when I tell you that I planted nasturtiums over 20 years ago once, and I've never really had to replant them since. They're just they just come up every year, and then we ignore them because they're really happy this time of year when we're ignoring the yard, and just drop their seeds, and they just come up, and they come up, and they come up. So it's either weeds or nasturtiums. So there are worse things in the world to have an entire plot of land that just has, nasturtiums. So don't get me wrong. But and it's just been really wet, so we haven't been able to really do any weeding, but things are starting to dry out, and I'm really looking forward to getting my hands in the dirt out there and cleaning it up. And I've mentioned several times that I bought a bag of bulbs from Costco for a cutting garden, and now I'm starting to panic as I'm talking to you. It is March 19th today, and I think you can plant these through March. So I guess I better get out there and get these suckers into the ground. Oh my goodness, that might be my project for the coming weekend. But it just feels like summer weather. We ate dinner outside one night, and I just really enjoy spending more time in the backyard in just, this sunny weather. And I know it's not going to stay. This is always the way it is, that we get this little reprieve. And I don't really want it to be in the 80s. I could live happily in the mid to high 70s. I know that's a really controversial temperature, right? Doesn't everybody want to live in that? But so I don't really want to jump right into the 80s, but just, the time of year where I can leave doors and windows open, and I just feel like there's lots of light and fresh air. So that's what's kind of happening now, and I am digging the weather. Oh my gosh, I just realized I just basically spent 4 minutes talking about the weather, so please forgive me. Let's move on to quilting. Once again, I am so happy to welcome Fat Quarter Shop as a sponsor for this week's podcast. Fat Quarter Shop is a one-stop show for quilting fabrics and supplies for quilters around the world. They stock quilt shop quality fabrics, pre-cuts, quilt kits, patterns, and notions. They are always coming up with exciting new exclusives, clubs, and quilt-along programs. Fat Quarter Shop carries all major brands such as Moda, Riley Blake, Wyndham, Robert Kaufman, and Art Gallery fabrics with the largest selection of fat quarter bundles in the world. Whatever fabric, pattern, or notion you're looking for, chances are they'll have it. And if they don't, just ask. Their customer service team is the best, and they will even help you match colors over the phone and online. Visit them at fatquartershop.com. This month, Fat Quarter Shop is featuring 20% off of confetti cottons from Riley Blake and 30% off of all Clover notions. I'll put a link in the show notes for you. Last episode, I think I mentioned that I was going to go to the Camarillo Quilt Guild meeting and watch a lecture and do a class with Sarah Goer. I'll put a link in the show notes. So I did what I said I was going to do, which is not a given. I went to the lecture, and I actually brought along my friend Minky from down the street, Minky Kim. And she's never been to a Quilt Guild meeting, so this was, kind of a fun little adventure for us. That particular Quilt Guild skews a little bit older. So the first thing Minky said after we came in and looked around a little bit is, I think that we are the youngest people in this room by a large amount. And she was not wrong. Although Sarah Goer herself is definitely younger than me. And Minky's younger than me. There's lots of people younger than me, but not at the Camarillo Quilt Guild. But, that is who is available to go to a Quilt Guild meeting at 9:30 on a Tuesday morning, so that makes sense. I need to actually check out some other quilt guilds that meet at night, like the Ventura Modern Quilt Guild. One of these days I'm going to get over there. It's just there's not a good way for me to get there. It's kind of a long ways away, and there's not a good road to get there. Anyways, irrelevant. So back to the Camarillo Quilt Guild. The lecture was great. So Sarah Goer is modern. She does a lot of improv, and she did like a slide presentation with kind of some of her philosophy of modern quilting. She does a lot of challenges, swaps and like modern quilt guild challenges and things like that, which I think is kind of cool because what it does is it gives her a framework to create a quilt, a piece of art even, let's call it. And that goes very much hand in hand with the book that I've told you a million times about called The Modern Improv Handbook. I think I butchered that title. I'll put a link in the show notes by, oh boy, Kristen, you should have been prepared. Sherilyn Woods, I believe. And so with improv, with like modern quilting, but especially improv, you need to create some limiting factors. So otherwise it's going to be a mess. There's no like message to it in the same way that, a jazz solo seems like it's random, but it's really playing around with variations of the melody. It's in the same key. It's doing arpeggios within that key, things like that. You need to create a few little rules for yourself. So that can be limiting yourself to colors or doing contrasting colors or colors in the same family. You could be playing around with a single shape. There's lots of different things that you can do to kind of give a theme to your piece. And so I really enjoyed her lecture. I learned a lot from her. And then she did a huge trunk show of all kinds of quilts that she's done. The ones that really spoke to me, like there was one particular one which apparently she did with the leftovers from a quilt challenge that she did. And it was just, I guess they were actually snowball blocks. I would have thought they were half square triangles. But she did, had snowball blocks. It was mostly an off-white quilt with little triangles that kind of formed butterflies, where they just met at the corners. And there were maybe just like 10 or 12 of these little two triangles coming together. And so it was mostly a negative space quilt. And I loved it. And they were just kind of irregularly spaced, but very nicely. And I said to Minky, I love that quilt. And I don't know if I'll ever be brave enough to do a quilt that really has so little to it. Do you know what I mean? I just feel like what we do is we piece. And so if there's so little to piece, what's the point? It's a lot of fabric to say so little. Yet, it's what I love. It's the type that really minimalistic quilting or quilt design is something that I love. And then you actually can do a lot with the quilting. But let's be honest, I'm a piecer, not a quilter. That's kind of my quilting identity. So I'm just not sure I can make myself do it. But I should just maybe do a mini quilt where I just do something very minimal and play around with that because, I find it really appealing. And the minimalism category at QuiltCon, I loved it. And I guess, what you do with a minimalist quilt has to be really good because there's so little of it. But yeah, so that was really fun. And then the next day, I got to go to the workshop. But actually, I'm jumping ahead because the night before the workshop, I needed to pick fabrics. So the project that we were going to work on is basically a bunch of different sized squares. And she said to, again, pick a theme, either squares in the same color family or two contrasting colors, and then having a background that contracts a lot. And it can be either one fabric or lots of different fabrics. So I wanted to do a low volume background so that I had, a scrappy background. And I thought that I would do like blues for my squares. So I pull out all the blues of my stash, which I have to say, I do not use my stash well. And I think that I have kind of figured out why. And it's because my stash does not work together. Because I feel like I've had several different quilting personalities since I started quilting like 8 or 9 years ago. And so my fabrics don't work together. So I love blue. I pull out the blues. And I want, I don't know how many, I want 7 or 8 different color blues, at least, to play around with. Or actually more. I think I was pulling more like even 15 or 20. So I wanted a range. I wanted them to go from dark to light. Well, first of all, I do have a very nice range of dark blues. And that was really pretty. And then I have a range of light blues. I realized once I was taking pictures with my phone, so it's black and white, and I have nothing in the middle. I have dark blues and I have light blues. I have very few medium blues, and my dark blues and light blues are completely different. They do not play well together at all. And I think I have admitted many times I'm a little color insecure, so I was just, I'm not really good. Some people are very brave about mixing things that I wouldn't, but then I was like, oh, that looks really good, but I'm just not that brave. So I started texting my resident color expert friend, Holly Ann, over at String and Story, and I'm like, help me. And so I'm sending her pictures. She is like Xing out one, saying, pull these out and then take another picture. I'm like, okay, I see why you're taking those out. And also, no, I like that one. And I send it back and I'm like, this is still not working. And here's what it looks in black and white. And she's saying, I don't know, I think it works. And I'm like, I don't think this works. So then I start looking around my sewing room for just, what am I going to do here? Do I have fabric in other places? Because I do have my stash organized by color in these particular bookshelves. But I also have another section of stuff that I'm kind of working with that are still in lines. That's in another area. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go over there. I'm going to see if there's anything I can pull. Well, I have this stack it was a fat quarter bundle from Lori Holt. I think it's the B Basics line. And it's super cute. It is the line that I'm doing my current hand-pieced quilt-along quilt in. So I picked like a rainbow of colors. Navies, aquas, greens, yellows, oranges, and reds. Okay, so like just, straight up rainbow. But that left a bunch of fabrics in this bundle that I wasn't using, kind of more of like the greeny blues and stuff. So it turns out there was this little stack of very appealing colors to me that are a greeny blue, bluey green. I don't know, what would we call that? It's not teal. It's definitely a little, I don't know. To look at it now, I would call it blues. That night, I would have called it more on the green side. But anyways, there was I would call it a starter kit of 4 or 5 fabrics that all went together. And then I was able to find some other things in my stash to add to it that very much went in this greeny aqua-y thing. As a matter of fact, I was able to pull a couple fabrics out of the blue pile that I was working with and add it to this greeny blue. Please, somebody give me words to describe colors. This newfound pile, and it looked actually better there, which just showed you that it's one of those things where you take a fabric and you put it next to blues, it looks blue. You put it next to green, it looks green. So anyways, I came up with a very nice pile. I was so relieved. And that was the first hurdle, but it really made me realize, number one, I've gone through my stash several times and pulled stuff out that it's not really me. And I really like the fabric in my stash, but it does not like each other. They do not want to play together. And I am really feeling drawn to using my stash better and creating some quilts out of that stash so that I'm just sort of not adding to the more consumerism, like the use what you have type of thing. It's going to take some creativity, I think, to figure out how to do that, because I'd really like to do just, like an all blue quilt. As a matter of fact, the hand piece quilt along, I wanted to do it scrappy blue and white. And I had the same problem. I don't know why I was surprised the other night, because I had the same problem that I could not get enough blues to work together. So what did I do? I resorted to a fat quarter bundle. So sort of cheating. But so then the next day I go to this class. I've never been to a workshop. So I, brought my sewing machine. It was kind of nice because there was, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 people there. We had like our own table. Oh, I also had to make a little design wall to take. So I have a piece of foam board that I use as a light reflector when I do photography. And I just wrapped some quilt batting around it and duct taped it to the back, and voila, a little temporary design wall, a little mini design wall. I think I'll leave it like that and go buy a new foam board for light reflecting purposes. So that was kind of cool. But again, so I really feel like this Sarah Goer, who used to be a math teacher, she really knew her stuff. And so she spent the first part of the class just kind of explaining the idea of creating these squares in, sizes that made you happy, but everything had to be sort of on the 1/2 inch. So 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5. And once you cut them up and laid them out, then you actually stopped and you kind of made a pattern for it on graph paper. You sketched it out. And then you were able to figure out how big of a quilt you wanted, and then you could figure out how to cut your background pieces so that you wouldn't go absolutely crazy trying to make this all work. And I think she calls it planned improv. So, it's very appealing to me to play around for a while, and then once you get something you're happy with, kind of commit it to paper and create a little bit of a pattern so that so you don't go totally crazy trying to fit everything, because I don't know, I'm not mathy, so taking the time to figure out the sizes on paper it was pretty cool. And I finished my first one pretty quickly. I basically did 2 quilt tops. They were, I don't know, I'm going to say roughly fat quarter size, 18 by I meant to make them 18 inches square, but math not my thing. So I've got 2 of them now. I don't know what to do with it. I might maybe make one more and turn it into a table topper. I like wide table runners. I learned this from buying one at Target that's I think that one's about 20 inches, but I think an 18-inch wide table runner is really nice, because a lot of the ones I make are like 12 inches, and now that seems super skinny to me. So I kind of like the width of that. So maybe I'll do that. I just figured that out right now. So thank you very much. So I'm leaving that up on my design wall for now to inspire me to maybe maybe one more might do it, maybe 2. But that was fun. But I've got a few other things to do before that. I sat down. I was feeling a little stressed, so I sat down and made a list of all the open quilting projects that I have going right now that have sort of a bit of an obligation attached to them. So it's not just something I want to do for myself, like the improv quilt I was just talking about. Things for magazines or for places that have sent me fabric to play with. And boy, the list is long and scary. So I needed to commit it to paper so it would stop floating around in my head. And so now I have a plan. So the quilt with the Boro fabric I've been talking about, that is on its way back to me from the long arm, from Holly Ann long armed that. And so I need to possibly block it because of the stretchy linen, and I'm a little bit worried about that. I need to look up blocking. Here's something I didn't think about, that it's a combination of this very dark kind of indigo blue and then off-white linen is the background. I don't pre-wash fabric. I never have. I've never had an issue with it. I throw in several color catchers whenever I wash it, but I'm not going to wash this. And I'm a little afraid that if I dunk it in the bathtub or I just spritz it with water to block it, that something's going to run. But, before it gets back, while it's in the mail, I can go test this. And that's what I need to make a note to just go test that, so I will calm down. Because what I'd like to do is just maybe spray it down with some water and pin it to the floor of my daughter's room before she comes home for spring break and make sure that it's nice and squared up before I trim it and bind it. So still need to write the pattern for that. So that's kind of my number one priority to get going on that. And it's funny how I can just be resistant to the number one priority, even though I love it. I love to bind. I love to make binding. I love to actually bind. So, but somehow when there's a deadline looming, it makes me not want to work on it. It's weird. So I talked about last week some other projects that are on my cutting table. I'm very excited to get quilting with Minky Someday Fabrics, doing the navy and pink quilt, and I'm not sure what that is destined for. And the Prairie Sisters fabric, I'm just keep mulling over ideas for that. And I finally got caught up with my own quilt along. For the hand piecing, the hand piece quilt along, I knocked out like 2.5 blocks over the weekend. That's the thing. When you get behind on mine and Patty's quilt along, it doesn't take that long to get caught up. So I did a lot of hand sewing while watching Umbrella Academy this weekend, and I will tell you about that more at the end. Speaking of the hand piece quilt along, we just released the 9th block, which is the 9th and final block. Next week is the sashing and setting, and then we're just going to give some people some time to figure it out before we do the grand prize. It's been so much fun. It's been a ton of work, but all in the best way possible. And my co-host, Patty Dudek at Elm Street Quilts, she was just on the Just Wanna Quilt podcast. I actually don't know when that just very recently. I was listening to it before I started recording today. She did a great job, and Elizabeth is always just like so fun and enthusiastic, and those interviews, they just go off in whatever direction strikes her fancy, which can be really like very fun and unexpected. So you might want to check out Patty over there. I'll put a link in the show notes. She talks about her Briar Rose quilt, which was in QuiltCon, which is a modern take on the Crown of Thorns quilt pattern. And it's actually in this month's issue of Make Modern magazine. So if you get that, definitely check it out. It's super cute. I love it. It's basically the type of quilt that I kind of aspire to make. You know what? It goes a lot along with what I was just talking about. It's kind of Crown of Thorns block, which Frances over at the Off Quilter Quilt made one in connection with her Friendship Album quilt, because Dorothy from Friendship Album makes a Crown of Thorns quilt. And Patty did a modern take on it where it's sort of like these half square triangles that sort of explode out. So it's a little on the minimalist side, and I love it. I love it. I really need to try something like that. Maybe I should just download that issue and make that actual quilt and break through that barrier that I've been hesitant to break through in the past. So until I actually get off my duff and start knocking things off of my big scary list, that is all I have to talk about for quilting. So let's move on to books. The first book I want to talk about is a book that's coming out on April 2nd, and I was lucky enough to get my hands on an advance copy, and it's called Dwelling by Melissa Michaels. Melissa Michaels has a fabulous blog called The Inspired Room. So she's a fabulous home decorator. It's very inspiring. You should go definitely check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes. She's written several books, but this one has a little different twist to it. So it's called Dwelling, and in the way it is written, the word well within the word dwelling is like gray and italicized, and it's called Simple Ways to Nourish Your Home, Body, and Soul. So it's not just a book about like how to decorate your house. It is about how to take care of yourself, body and soul, and your home so that they are all working together. This book, like the concept of this book, could not be any more me. So let me just read a little bit of the back here where it says, "Feel well where you dwell. Our dwellings, both our home and body, are intricately connected. Each has the potential to inspire the other to be its very best. Your home is where life happens. Create a sanctuary that inspires your well-being so that you can experience greater peace, comfort, and belonging. Your body, mind, and soul need daily nourishment to help you feel healthy and happy. Discover simple ways to make self-care a priority." So this is just absolutely right up my alley. And I just got it not too long ago, so I'm not that far into it, maybe 25%, but I'm loving it, and it's actually one of those things that it's a little bit of a workbook. Like you can journal your way through it. There's journaling prompts so that you can, kind of like my power sheets, you can kind of uncover what's important to you and then make sure that you are honoring that, making time for that, clearing space for that. And so I busted out a new notebook for this. I love a good notebook. And I've started kind of actually taking the time. I'm a little resistant to do that. I want to just keep reading and not stop and do the journal prompts. But I am being faithful to do at least most of them. But let me just tell you like the names of some of the chapters. Invitation, well-being, sanctuary, loveliness, savoring, streamlining, foraging, nourishing, gathering, thriving. So she kind of dives into each of these. So I am hoping that by my next podcast, which is in 2 weeks, I will have definitely gotten all the way through this. And I'll have a little bit more to say about it. But I will tell you that I'm very much enjoying it. Definitely go check out her website and be inspired. And all her books are just, they're, from a design perspective, it's lovely. And this is just, it's a really nice kind of smallish size, and it's hardback, and it's got these blue watercolor paintings on it. It's really nice. So could not be more at my alley. Maybe you're the type of person that it would appeal to you too. I'll tell you more about it next week. But if you do, if you feel inspired just by what you're hearing here, I'll put a link to her website. And I believe there's going to be some, if you pre-order it, there's some goodies that go along with that. So I haven't really looked into what that is, but I'll send you over there to check it out. So that is Dwelling by Melissa Michaels. The other book that I'm reading in the mornings when I want to do a little bit of inspirational reading, and I've talked about this before, it's not a new book, but it's Simple Abundance by Sarah Van Brethenbach. I never really know how to say that name. I'll put a link in the show notes. It's one of those books that each day, like you can just, whatever the date is today, you can just look that up, and each month has a theme. I've never been through the whole book before. I basically kind of float in and out of it, when I'm looking for something inspirational. But the month of March has a really just nice theme of self-care. And so I've been really enjoying that. And that's a book that you can so easily find used on Amazon or something. And it's just that little dose of inspiration in the morning that I think just makes me kind of, think about how I want to spend the day, creating little spaces in your life. As quilters, obviously... I have more than a little space in my life that I have carved out for my own. I have like an entire dining room that I have taken over. But just making time to do those kinds of things that make you happy, to overcome those little bits of resistance to jump in and sit down and sew or knit or cook or read. There's always something else that we can do to keep us busy, that will just keep us humming along and productive. But, when I get to the end of my life, I hope that I will not be measured by how clean my refrigerator is, but, by the quilts I've left behind. And so let's just get our priorities straight, people. Quilting over cleaning. And again, the other two books that I am reading and just doing in little bits, and I've talked about them both before, but I'm just not knocking back the books these days, is Becoming by Michelle Obama. I am absolutely loving her story, and she's a very good writer, so I'm enjoying that. Again, I'm not that far into it, but I think I absolutely can recommend it. I'm loving it. And The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. I started this a while ago, and for some reason found other things that I wanted to read, but I rediscovered it on my Kindle. That is the problem with Kindles. It's kind of an out of sight, out of mind thing for me. But I discovered it because I'm really trying to either read paper books, which is what my Michelle Obama book is, physical book, or just read it on my Kindle and not my iPad, because the iPad can be distracting if I see news alerts coming in or text messages. So I need to just leave that when I read at night somewhere else and read on my Kindle. So I rediscovered The Great Alone. I'm again, 20-ish% in, and I'm enjoying it very much so far, I'm not that far, about a family that moves to very rural Alaska and what it's going to be like there. So that's, from what I've read, that's what I think it's going to be about. I don't like to read jacket covers because I really hate spoilers, which is why I struggle to talk about these things on podcasts, because I don't want to give away too much, but I want to give you enough to encourage you to maybe check it out. So I feel like these are really lame book references in reviews this week, because I haven't actually finished a book for a while, except for, I talked about the Home Fires ebooks last podcast, and I don't think I had finished all 4 at that point. And I have. What I have to say about the what are they called? Keep the Home Fires Burning ebooks, which are the continuation of the Home Fires TV series, is that I enjoyed them. They are not... I have a little bit of issue about the way they're written. I've said it before, he's a better screenwriter than novelist. And I think maybe one of the most disappointing things about it is that it can be disappointing or not. It didn't resolve with the 4th ebook, so there are 4 ebooks. They're very short. Together they make one book, which the last time I checked was actually on sale for $8.99 for the first 4. But there's clearly more coming, because he did not resolve all the things that I wanted resolved. And the next one is not coming until October, which I am thinking means that he's just going to write a whole book by then. And it's not going to be this weird thing of let's just dole out, 75 pages and charge $2.99 for it. I mean, it's not about the money because it's about the same no matter what. But I think he was just trying to meet the fan demand at that point. So anyways, I enjoyed the story. I like those characters. I will, in fact, probably buy the next one because I am invested. I want to know what happens, and I don't find the writing so atrocious that I can't get through it. So I'm just invested in the story. Oh my goodness. I didn't think I had enough to talk about today, but I've apparently just blabbed on longer than usual. So let me just move on to shows. I mentioned before that I was watching, is it Umbrella Academy? The Umbrella Academy? I'm not even sure. But it's a new Netflix show that I came across because I'm in a Facebook group for the podcast Sorta Awesome, which is a really good podcast to check out. And it has a great Facebook group where people just basically are doing lives together, and that we're just, everyone's just asking questions about, like parenting, beauty, clothes, just all kinds of things. And someone said, basically, I'm on bed rest. What's something that good I can binge watch? And overwhelmingly, people were saying Umbrella Academy. So I went to go check it out. And then it turns out that my daughter, who writes for the school newspaper at UC San Diego, she did a review on it. And maybe if I can find it, maybe I'll even link to it because I thought she wrote a really good review about it. So this is a show that's a little tiny bit superhero-y. I hesitate to call it superhero-y, but it's definitely fantasy. It's, there are elements that are not real life. Let me just say that. But I will tell you things that happen in the first, 5 minutes of the show, so it's not really spoilers. But basically, one particular day at some point, a number of people, I'm going to say like 48 people, delivered babies that day that were not pregnant when the day began. So like something super weird happened. And some eccentric billionaire went around and tried to adopt as many of these babies as he could, and he ended up with, again, I'm going to say 7. I could be wrong. Something like that. And he raised them in this house, and many of them had superpowers, and they were like his own little Avengers, his own little, save the world group of kids. So they all had a very weird upbringing. But the show really starts when this guy has died and they had all scattered. And so now they're the same age, right? I don't know, like 30-ish. They all come back together for their dad's funeral. And, and then that's where the launching pad for this story. And it's quite good. It's quite good. It's just fun. There's a great soundtrack to it. I couldn't figure out why I was singing, like humming to myself. I Think We're Alone Now, which I think was like a Tiffany song from the 80s. And when I went back and rewatched the beginning, because I kind of started watching it and I set it aside. And then when I saw that scene, I'm like, that's why I've been singing this song. It really stuck with me. But they're basically they're trying to... I don't want to give too much away, but something's going to happen and they're going to try to stop it, and they're going to, kind of figure out stuff about their dad and why they were raised the way they were. And so it's quite good. I'm not actually done. I think there's maybe 10 episodes, and I think I'm on episode 7, so I'm getting there. So it hasn't resolved, but the story has lots of good twists and turns. Unexpected things are happening, and there's a lot of humor to it, and so I'm really enjoying that. And for what it's worth, my husband and I are plugging along with Madam Secretary with Tia Leone, and I could not love it more. The way their marriage plays out, somebody direct messaged me and said that she thought that the way their marriage is like one of the best marriages, portrayed on television. And I could not agree more. I so appreciate, it's Tim Daly, who was on Wings. He was the older brother on Wings, who I always liked better than the younger one that we were all supposed to be in love with. But, he does such a great job. And they're in a very much the same kind of age and parenting section of their lives that I am. And so it's just really fun to see a strong male character who can handle being married to a strong woman. So this is so unlike Prince Albert and Victoria. Did I say this before? I could have. Or Prince Philip in The Crown. Here's a guy that just basically treats his wife like a wife normally treats a husband with a high-powered job, which is, like just completely supportive and holding down the fort, So totally loving that. And I guess, let me just say right now, I'm just going to take a little break to say thank you for the people who left reviews, because someone had something to say about Madam Secretary. So MN Zen, thank you for your wonderful review. And I want to say Posaru, Posaru, also left a review. Thank you so much. And Pecky Belly says that if you like Madam Secretary, to check out the Satellite Sisters podcast, because they apparently discuss it. And I am totally going to do that. I once listened to a Lost rewatch podcast when I got completely into Lost about 4 years ago. Again, I'm not exactly on the cutting edge of these shows. Lost had been like 10 years before. And it's so fun to kind of listen to these things where they break it down. So thank you for that. So if you also like Madam Secretary, check out the Satellite Sisters podcast. So let's finish this out with my homemaking section here. And I feel like I've really gone on and on, so I'll keep this short. But basically, I've been kind of interested in upping my game with my cooking lately. I mean, I do fine. And I feel like I cook meals on a pretty tight rotation, but I think compared to a lot of people, I don't. I use this index card system where basically every normal meal that I make, that's really in the rotation, I have an index card for. And the idea is that I could just deal out, 6 or 7 for the week. And then that could be what I make. In reality, I kind of just flip through them, but it reminds me of what I make, right? So I probably have a rotation of 30 dishes or something. I'm not like on a tight rotation of 5, but I still am sick of all 30 of them. 30 might be an exaggeration. I don't know. So I've been a little bit interested in upping my game with meals. And part of that reason is my husband cooks on Saturday nights. And we've done this for years. He likes to cook. As soon as he gets home from work, he's totally in the kitchen with me prepping stuff and cooking. So I'm really lucky in that way. But let's be honest, coming up with the things to make is 80% of it. It's the cooking's not the hard part. It's the coming up with stuff. So I asked him years ago, you profess to like to cook. Will you just take over dinner one night a week? And so he does that on Saturdays. And I got to say, he makes really good stuff. And he's looking up stuff and food and wine. And, he makes a lot of what we call triangle meals, like a protein, a starch, and a vegetable. But they're really good. It's like grilled swordfish with lime butter and mushroom risotto and, I don't know, roasted broccoli or something. Just really good stuff. He does all the, kind of like the same thing, like tri-tip, baked potato, vegetable. And this is not the way I cook at all. Nothing I make involves one piece of meat. It's not that I always make casseroles, but I'm more like pasta with a sauce, or I make a lot of like fish tacos or regular tacos, or just dishes where things are mixed together more is what I'm trying to say. Chili or a roast, things like that. And so I wouldn't want every one of my meals to be a triangle meal, but this once a week is really good. He also makes these great things, like he'll make jambalaya or shrimp risotto. So I just feel like every Saturday night I get basically what is a restaurant quality meal. He also makes bread from scratch a lot. And I'm like, well, on his night to cook. So, especially in the winter, when we don't mind heating up the house, because it actually, you have to cook it for a while. He makes it a lot. And so I feel a little jealous. I feel like when my kids are out on their own, they're going to remember his meals more than my meals. And so I started flipping through my cookbooks, and I thought, you know what? I own a treasure trove of cookbooks here, and I've always wanted to do this, kind of pick a cookbook and sort of cook my way through it. And so I need to kind of do that. I do have, not that it's high-end cooking, but I have a Rachel Ray 30-Minute Meals cookbook that he gave me years ago, back when, I was watching food TV. And I got to say that there are some real favorite dishes in that cookbook, and they are easy. Rachel Ray, I don't think she's a formally trained chef, but that woman knows what tastes good. And so she has a lot of these, our Sloppy Joe's recipes from that. Jonah's very favorite chicken piccata pasta is out of that cookbook. And so she just has really a lot of really staple meals. But again, that's not actually what I'm looking for right now. I also have, what's it called? Simple Food, I think by Alice Waters, that I should just really work my way through. The same way that I worked my way through some free motion quilting books and learned a lot by the end. I just feel like I need to dig into a cookbook. So I'm not sure what that's going to be, but I'll keep you posted on that. And that really wraps up this week. I'm sorry, I was quite a rambler this week. Maybe it is my way of compensating for not feeling like I had much content. But I always enjoy spending this time with you. I hope that you got to listen while you were doing something fun, drinking something cozy, and I will see you next time.